directional mic, so I'm gonna, if I don't look at you, I'm speaking straight into this mic, because that's the way this one works. My name is Karole Honas. I am a retired television anchor, about 35 some odd years in this market. The last few years I reported Blackfoot and Idaho Falls exclusively, so I don't know Pocatello as well as I did when I first started, but I started at Channel 6 back in 1977, so I know. The color helps, don't you think? You know?
Very tired.
Yeah, I'm going in Friday for a touch-up, so we will be not quite showing our gray yet, but it's definitely there if anybody asks you. Okay, we'll just keep it kind of hidden a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about how this is going to work. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on vouchers, credits, scholarships, everything that has to do with taxpayer money going into a private or religious school. We'll introduce our panel. They'll have a few minutes to introduce themselves, talk about themselves, what their stand is, okay? And we will have questions that have come into our website. We'll start off with those just to get everybody warmed up, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And there will be, I believe that's going to be a live microphone down on that end. It looks like that one's for the short people. So short, that's a short mic right there. And for taller people on this end right here. Here is something, I've done 3 of these now, and here is something that we've learned is people tend to get up and want to tell their personal story. And, you know, we've had several that's like, well, 11 years ago, I had a daughter in this school district that, and you're just going, no, it's a question. So if it doesn't start with who, what, where, when, or why, you're probably off to the wrong foot, and I will cut you off because we want as many comments as we can get, but we would really like them to be questions and not your personal life story. Okay, so it sounds cruel, but this is experience talking. After doing several of these, we want to get cut right to the chase, okay? And if you don't, you're going to hear from me. So I'll give you a couple minutes. I'll give you a couple minutes to get there, but then you got to get to the question, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? All right. We are Save Our Schools. This is an organization of professional public school administrators, teachers, supporters. This is not a PAC that is putting this on. We do not support a candidate. There's no money exchanging. We're not going to give money to a candidate that's running. We're basically here to educate, and it especially came about when House Bill 93 passed last legislative session. So some of the voucher mechanics that we're going to deal with tonight, just as a matter of definition, so you know, we are using the word voucher tonight. It is an umbrella term. So in Idaho, it's tax credits. Other states have vouchers. Other states have scholarships. Anything that falls under that umbrella tonight, we're calling it vouchers. Is that good? Everybody's helpful with that and good with that? House Bill 93 created a $50 million program, and it offers tax credits in Idaho to students up to $5,000, $7,500 for special needs. This is the first time in Idaho's history that public dollars are now going to private schools. It kind of snuck up on some people, and it's very obvious why. A lot of people working full-time jobs, come home, got to fix dinner, got to feed the kids, got to get them to soccer or baseball or t-ball, got to get them to bed. They don't have time to get on the computer then and say, well, what did the Idaho legislature do today? And so vouchers kind of snuck up on a few of us. Okay, so here's the deal. Day one, okay, the proponents for vouchers won round one, okay? They have a $50 million pile of money, our money, taxpayer money, right here. It's the golden goose that laid the egg. It's right there. Can't touch it. It's done. We're not going to reinvent the wheel tonight. We're not going to re-debate whether we should have vouchers or not. It's done. It's a done deal. What can we do? What is the next step? The next step is, let's put a cap on it. Right there, okay? Fine, you won, 50 million. Already the proponents for vouchers are saying they expect to get it up to 300 million this legislative session, okay? They're not afraid to say it. It is in print. It is in their brochures. this is what they're going for. So our whole goal this evening is to educate you enough about why we should cap it, that you will feel very comfortable talking to your friends, going to the coffee shop, and even more importantly, talking to your lawmaker and saying, look, when you get up there in January, I want you to cap this. I don't want to see us be like Arizona, Wisconsin, and get up into $1 billion of tax money set aside for 7% of the students in Idaho. All right, Bingham County, that's my place. No private schools. We don't have any. There's no private schools in Bingham County. So every dollar we raise in Bingham County that goes into the Golden Goose, $50 million, is going to Ada County. Okay? So that's just a fact. We know that. We know it. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to try to lock it down right now and not let ourselves get into the situation that other states that passed this have gotten into. The people opposed to House Bill 93, it was 20-1. Did not want it. 73 superintendents in this state signed a proclamation saying no, no, vote no. 37,000 Idahoans called the governor's office and said, please veto this. 5,000 voted and said, oh, we like it. Those probably the 5,000 that go to Bishop Kelly. I don't know. Do you understand, though, that they heard loud and clear we didn't like it? Not loud enough. Got to be louder. That's what we're going to do tonight, is try to teach you enough facts that you can take on the road to your lawmaker and to the candidates that are running. Because these votes slip by in the legislature by 1, 2, 3 votes. Very, very, very close. All it's going to take is a couple more pro-voucher candidates to win, be in the legislature, and boom, there's our $300 million now in tax dollars set aside just for the private religious schools. The other thing we want you to know is that there is no one in the Save Our Schools family that is against private schools. Private schools are fantastic. So are homeschools, charter schools. We have so many choices. They're all good. We don't have anything against private religious schools. They've done a marvelous job. We just have something against our tax dollars helping that small, small, small contingent in Idaho. All right? So if at any time you're confused by anything I'm saying, just raise your hand and say that again. Explain it again. And so I'm looking. I don't see any hands go up. So I'm still teaching okay, I guess. On our panel today. Oh, and don't forget, this is one other thing. The main reason we're here, right, is, and this is our motto, and you need to write it down on your palm of your hand so you don't forget it. Not $1 more. Not $1 more. Okay? We'll let you win round 1. Not $1 more.
I have a question about the House Bill 93. Should I wait?
Yes, waiting for questions, because you will definitely get the opportunity. Yes, absolutely. So just hang on to your questions. This is our panel today. Scott Woolstenhulme, Superintendent at Bonneville School District, grew up in Teton Valley, Idaho, so born and bred Idahoan from the heart. He attended BYU, majored in English. He also speaks Japanese. And how convenient has that been for you? Does that come in a lot?
Spoke Japanese is a better phrase.
Okay.
Once upon a time.
There you go. We just got a new minister that speaks Japanese. We actually have one Japanese lady in our congregation. She's thrilled. First time she spoke Japanese in a long time. Scott might have to get you together with her. Anyway, he is, like I said, Bonneville District. Gosh, he's done everything. I mean, just everything. All kinds of backgrounds. Scott is one of the guys that I always pick to interview on any school issue because he could explain it, he was articulate, and he made it so everybody could understand it. So this guy's top notch in my book. Kelly Heil, public school educator for 20 years. She has taught in 3 states, 4 districts. She mentors and hosts ISU students in her home, in her classroom. She serves as an EL coach. She's the department chair for the Pocatello-Chubbuck School District, a member of the Idaho Education Association, serves as the IEA Regional 5 president. She teaches 6th grade world history at Hawthorne Middle School. Thank you so much, Kelly. And Marcy Curr, master's degree in organizational communication, 30 years of experience in speech and debate. And that could come in very handy. We might learn some good tricks from her tonight about how to debate this with people that can't hear facts. You know the ones, you've met them. They're actually our friends and neighbors, but don't confuse them with the facts. They already know what they think. Okay, so she's going to help us with that. 17 years of classroom experience, now works at Pocatello High School. My parents graduated from there many years ago. She works with youth in correctional and rehab settings, and she has presented and moderated at conventions. So we have excellent people with a background in education to help us understand this issue. So guys, I'm going to let you now introduce yourselves again and tell a little bit about how you feel about the voucher program. Okay? Do you want to start, Marcy? Sure. Good. Yep. Are we talking into the microphone?
Thanks for the introduction. HB 93 is a concerning symptom of a cataclysmic issue that we're facing in Idaho, and that issue is that we have a government that is choosing to ignore our people. If you look at what Carol said in her introduction, testimonies were opposed to this legislation at a rate of 20-1, and 37,000 people, including my mom, who is retired, my aunt, who is retired, and my cousin, who has no children, called in and begged our governor not to pass this, and yet it passed. That does not sound like a government by the people or for the people. This is a problem because Idahoans do not want our taxpayer dollars to be going to private schools or religious schools in or out of state. If you look at the legislation, it does not restrict that money from leaving here. Every dollar we divert from public funds to private, religious, or home schools has severe economic, social, and academic impacts on our kids. HB 93 not only directs funding away from public education, but from every other program in the state. According to the Vice Chair of the Senate Education Committee, this is because the money for HB 93 is taken out of the state funds before that money is released into the legislative appropriations process. So if you think about money being withheld from your paycheck, you know that you're going to have less to pay bills with. Well, our legislature this year is going to have $50 million taken out of their money before they get to go through the process of allocating it. And what that means is that we're going to see a reduction in money available for our social programs, our infrastructure programs, our county programs, our education, our public safety, and even more. However, the impact on our schools is exacerbated by the fact that our schools are also funded on a per pupil basis, meaning every student who is not in our classroom, we lose money for. So the schools are getting hit twice. Second, according to the ACLU, unlike public education, voucher-funded schools are not required to and typically do not accept students with disabilities, students with behavioral issues, or students with language barriers. They also do not accept students who do not fit the school's religious, political, or socioeconomic expectations. So the social fabric of our school communities are being torn as we segregate ourselves further and remove opportunities for our kids to develop friendships and empathy that cross all walks of life, setting us up for an even more intolerant community in the future. Finally, the academic impact of vouchers is dismal. Rural schools and schools with high English language learner populations, so basically the majority of schools in Idaho, typically suffer the greatest during budget cuts, resulting in lower educational outcomes. But don't be fooled into thinking that when we talk about reduced education and academics, we're just talking about, quote, failing public schools. Private and religious schools are not all there cracked up to be either. Due to the lack of oversight, accountability, and transparency, those schools fell as well. In fact, according to the National Education Policy Center, states like Ohio and Louisiana actually saw a decrease in academics in students who were attending their voucher-funded private schools. I do strongly believe that parents should have the right to, quote, nurture and direct their children's education, as is written in Idaho Code 32-1010. But I believe that we should do that by helping to fix the schools that service everybody, or by paying tuition out of your own pocket, not through redistribution of wealth. We need to keep our Idaho taxpayer dollars public.
That's a great introduction, Marcy, and no surprise that she did such a great job of really defining the issues that are before our state, before us as citizens of the state, and then before our legislators. I want to point out just a couple of additional things to what Marcy shared, and that is, not only did our legislators not listen to their constituents and the governor, they also didn't pay attention to our state constitution. And so that's something that I've been engaged in this fight, it feels like, for a decade now. And I came to the conclusion probably about 8 years ago that there were certain conversations that weren't going to make a difference with our legislators. Talking about the impact on funding to our public schools wasn't going to make much of a difference with our legislators that were just hell-bent on saying we have to have this voucher option for kids that our public schools, they don't believe are serving well enough. And so I switched gears and I really started to focus on their oath to protect and defend our Constitution. And our Constitution in our state is very, very clear about the legislature's responsibility. It actually uses the word duty. Our legislator's duty to establish a uniform system of free, common public schools, period. When they approved House Bill 93, they completely ignored, every legislator that voted for that completely ignored that constitutional duty. Because there is no uniformity for the expectations for the recipients of these public tax dollars. There's no thoroughness in the education system. There's no guarantee of the thoroughness that our students receive in our public schools. And there, as Marcy talked about, there's absolutely no guarantee that every student will have access to that like they're promised in our state constitution. So our legislators are not only ignoring what we, the citizens, have asked them to consider what our desire for our state is, they're also ignoring their constitutional responsibility. So if they're not listening to us and not listening to the Constitution, who are they listening to? And the reality is they're listening to out-of-state interest groups, very, very powerful, very, very wealthy interest groups that for decades have been working to undermine and discredit and destroy our public education system. The reason why that matters so much is what comes in our Constitution before what I just quoted, and that is, it starts off with this preface. The stability of a Republican form of government depending mainly upon the intelligence of the people, okay? The stability of our Republican form of government depends on the intelligence of the people. So as we eradicate that uniform system of public schools, it won't happen this week, it won't happen this year, but over time, we will see, I believe, the dissolution of our government because we will no longer have this common system of schools that have served our country so well for the past 120 to 150 years. And so that's why I believe so strongly that we have to stand up. We have to take action. We have to let our voices be heard. And if our current legislators won't listen to us, we need to find legislators that will understand the importance of maintaining and establishing that common free system of public schools.
Okay, that's a really hard act to follow, but as a former government teacher, let me just say I ditto everything that Scott just said. When I taught AP Government, and Economics to seniors, my job was to get them ready to be U.S. citizens, fully engaged, critical thinkers, and ready to step onto that world stage. I took that job very seriously. I am worried that with the lack of transparency, with the lack of fiscal responsibility, that those kids are not going to be prepared the way that they should be prepared. Because there's not going to be a public school education if we keep dismantling the funding mechanisms to make sure that all children get educated in this state. I grew up in Wyoming, not too far away from here. I am from Green River, Wyoming, a little town. Those of you who are railroaders, you know what I'm talking about. My little town did not have any options other than a public school. Now, I was fortunate in that I grew up in a county that had a lot of funding coming in through property taxes. And I got a phenomenal education because of that. I didn't realize how privileged I was until I became an educator myself and had to teach in a different district in the state of Wyoming that didn't have the income coming in. I have seen the disparity that happens when we do not fully fund our public education systems. We cannot allow that to continue. That's why we've got to stop the expansion that we know is the #1 priority for those legislators who got this passed in the first place. And I would also ask that those of you who don't think the primary matters, it matters. The reason why this became a law is because we lost legislators who had stopped it in the past, in the primary. So my call to action for each one of you is to get involved in the primary elections that are coming up. Don't write them off as, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's the general that matters. Maybe in other states that's true, but not in ours. So please take the time to become educated. Take the time to listen. Reach out to those of us who are very passionate about this. We want to help educate you. We want to help educate your kids, and we can't do that if we're dismantling public education. Thank you.
One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is that 50 million that we took off the top is protected. And then the governor said, now all the rest of you state agencies got to cut your budgets by 6%. Revenues are not coming in this year like we thought they would. But not the 50 million, okay? It's protected. And they did it that way on purpose, and that's one of the ways I think they got past the constitutional question, is they ran it through the State Tax Commission instead of the Department of Education. So you got the state tax guys saying, we don't know what we're doing here. We don't know, this isn't our strength. And they said, that's okay. We just need a couple employees, and you're going to hire 2 new ones anyway. It's already in the budget. They've now hired 7. 7. In the wrong department, not in education. So it's just kind of sad. And one other point I'd like to make is, do you know how many taxes in Idaho are audited? 2%. So, I'm not telling you that to encourage you to cheat on your taxes. But the people that are going to try and get these credits have to list what they spent their money on, and why they should get this tax credit. There's nobody going to check and see what it was. Because in other states, we have found they bought Legos, they went to Disneyland with their family. It's not being checked because there's no accountability. So that would be my first question. And Scott, you might be, any one of you can answer this, but there are like 4 things that these private and religious schools do different than public school. And one of them is the accountability. We can't follow the dollar. What else?
I think there's probably at least 300 pages of Idaho code of things that they won't follow, right? That are all the things that public schools are required to follow. So I think there's such an interesting point that, and Carol mentioned numbers, but for a typical student, it's a $5,000 tax credit. For a special education student or student with disabilities, it's $7,500 that the parents can qualify for. In our district, we receive about $8,000 per student. Whether they're special education or not special education, we get the same $8,000. So for that $8,000, we are ensuring every dollar that we spend, literally every dollar we spend as a school district, is published on our website. Anybody can go and they can see any dollar and exactly how it's spent. This will be a black box. We won't have any idea where any of this $50 million goes. We ensure that every one of our educators passes a criminal background check, and not just our educators, anybody who comes to work for us, anybody who comes to volunteer for us has to go through a criminal background check. There is no protections like that at all for these students. We have to make sure that our teachers are certified and qualified and actually have the education like these two outstanding educators next to me have to actually teach what they're asked to teach. There's no guarantee of that. The list just goes on and on and on of all the things, all the return on investment that our citizens have with the $8,000 that comes to our school district or any school district in the state compared to the $5,000 or $7,500 blank check that will go to eventually into the hands of private schools, and sometimes not even private schools, just into the hands of educational providers, and we don't even know who that would be.
We have no idea what the curriculum will be. And I asked Wendy, I moderated a debate with Wendy and Rod Grammer, and specifically asked, somebody could start a Satan school. You know, and she said, oh, that would never happen. And I said, why? But you don't know that it won't happen. She goes, well, it never would, not in Idaho. I said, but you don't know that. And since they don't have to tell you their curriculum, you have no idea what they are teaching in the private school. Hey, boy, in public school, you can go right in. You can sit in the classroom. You can find out what they're teaching. You can complain about it, too. You can go to a school board meeting. They're not going to have school boards. Now, they're not going to have anything that gives you anything. All right, so it's just these are just things we would like you to file away in your head for little cards for when you meet somebody that thinks this is a great idea. Just say, well, what about this? What about this? We'll just keep throwing these little darts at you to try to teach you why this is not maybe the best thing for Idaho. These are some of the questions, again, that came in from the public beforehand. Let's see. The governor asked state agencies, I said, to make a cut up of 6%, okay, because the revenues are coming in lower. So, House Bill 93, that money, not touched by a 6% cut. Where I'm not a great budget person, any one of you, what is 6% to you? What's 6% to your school district?
So 6% is roughly $6 million to our school district. We run right around $100 million. It's about $105 million budget based on the funding we receive from the state. So if that $50 million would have come to public schools instead of going out to private schools or whatever, then it would have been a $2 million influx into our school district. So that would have been about a third of what they're asking us to cut. That's in addition to the fact that we're, in our district in Bonneville, we're already facing a $4 million shortfall from the switch from when we were funded based on enrollment to attendance. Interestingly, this one's all enrollment that they're funding, right? While the governor vetoed continuing to fund schools based on enrollment, they're now essentially sending a blank check to all these families based on enrollment, and we're back to attendance. And again, that shift from being funded for every student versus their average daily attendance resulted in a $4 billion shortfall to our school district. So that's, between the two, we're looking at a $10 million shortfall in our district.
In Blackfoot, I think I learned last night that if we had the $50 million, if there was still $50 million in the budget that could be appropriated to schools, the Blackfoot School District would have gotten $1 million more than what they've got. So that might be a $3 million cut instead of just a $4 million cut. Yeah. Kelly, tell me all the things that they keep saying that this is a private choice, a school choice issue. Idaho has a lot of school choice. Can you describe what we already have?
Absolutely. Actually, in 2023, the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation actually ranked the state of Idaho as number 3 in the nation for school choice. Now, keep the Heritage Foundation in mind because they're actually the think tank that is bankrolling all of the national school vouchers systems throughout the United States. So they're going to states like ours, funding candidates' campaigns, hoping to get school vouchers a uniform thing across the United States. Okay, so that organization said in 2023 that the state of Idaho had number 3 in the nation for most school choice. So what does that mean? Well, we have schools that have open boundaries. So if you don't want your student to go to Hawthorne, although wrong choice because we are kick booty educators over there. Just saying, some of my peeps are in the audience. You could send your child to Alameda if you wanted to. Equally amazing people over there as well, right? So you could Say, I want my child to go to a different school. That's open boundary. That's school choice. You can send your child to a plethora of charter schools here in Pocatello or in Chubbuck, right? We've got choices. You can homeschool your student. We do have a couple of private schools in Pocatello that if you would like to, you can have your child educated there. We have school choice. We also have online education programs such as IDLA, which provides especially high school students the opportunities to pick up credits that they wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to do so. And they get to tap into advanced opportunities money that the state's provided to them, which who knows if that money is going to exist if we have to do 6% holdbacks. Right? So that money has helped kids get farther along in their high school education, closer to getting an associate's degree so that they can go to college, well, far ahead than I was, right? We also have, I just lost my train of thought.
Homeschools, we've got homeschools.
Right, we do have homeschools. And then we have really interesting programs. So I used to live in Sandpoint, Idaho, which, by the way, lovely place. I love it up there. What that school district has done in the last few years is quite an interesting pilot program. There's a lot of homeschool kids up in Sandpoint. One, because kids want to go ski. Let's just be honest. They want to go up on Schweitzer, and they don't want to be sitting in a classroom. I get it. Skiing is fun. I'm not a huge proponent of skiing, but kids love it. Anyway, so the district saw a few years ago that they were losing enrollment. So they said, how in the heck can we help these homeschool kids and their families gain access to certified staff who can help enrich, supplement the homeschool education that's happening at home? So they created what is called the Homeschool Academy. And I think this is hilarious, but the professor, not really a professor, but her last name is McGonigal, and she is the head teacher. And so I call her Professor McGonigal when I get to go to Sandpoint, and she chuckles. But the reality is she's in charge of a program that allocates her time, as well as educators, to provide supplemental education to homeschool students. I think that is an amazing opportunity. That's what we lose when we start providing $50 million, is we're taking away some of those innovative approaches that exist.
Thank you. What happened in the big bill federally dealing with school vouchers?
Take that one.
Yep.
Okay, so recently the federal government passed as part of the Big Beautiful Bill, a national voucher program. And their version of the voucher program is very similar to the version that we have here in Idaho, in that the money, the $5 million a year that was set aside for that voucher program, does come out of the budget prior to it going to the House or Senate for appropriations. So that money is going to come off the top. So it will not be affected by any of the budget cuts. Similar to we need to make a 6% decrease here, and it's going to affect everything but our money. That's going to happen at the federal level as well. The other thing that's happening with that legislation is that, unlike the bill that passed in Idaho, which said that it services mostly families that are 3% of the poverty level, which is about $95,000 income for a family of 4. The federal version increases that, and to get the federal voucher, you only have to make less than $295,000 a year. That is 95% of the population of Idaho now qualifies for a national voucher system. Other problems that we're going to encounter, the Idaho system has put into place the ability for someone who is lower income, who says, that's great that I get money back in April for the $5,000 I spent on my kid this year. I can't afford that. In Idaho, you can apply and say, look, I can't afford that. Can I get my money before school starts and get it early? The national program, parents have to donate $1,500 or $1,600 into scholarship granting organizations within the state. And if you donate to those scholarship granting organizations, you are then able to apply to those scholarship granting organizations to get voucher money. Make sense? No. So what this means is, even more so than the Idaho program that we have, the national program is going to be very exclusionary for lower income and rural families. It's going to make it harder for them to access that money. The additional problem with that is that now 95% of Idahoans have access to up to $5,000 per kid to spend on that. A really simple analogy to think of is, let's say that you work at a company. My husband works at the Idaho National Laboratory. He's out on the desert and they have a cafeteria. So let's pretend you work for somewhere where at the cafeteria you eat free every day. Are there people who bring their own lunches? Sure. Not very many, because you eat free, right? Let's say that now your business says, well, for next year, you could opt out of eating free in the cafeteria, and I will give you $5 a day to go buy yourself lunch. But here's the deal. There's only 2 restaurants in town. One of them has pizza and a soda for $8, and the other one has a burger and fries for $7.50. Who's going to eat homemade meals? The people who are already eating them. Who's going to eat at the restaurant? The people who are already eating out, because they already could afford to go somewhere else. And what's going to happen at those restaurants? Now we know that our major customer base gets $5 more. My pizza's $13 at lunch now. And that's what's going to happen when you do this to our public education system. By handing families in Idaho the opportunity to do this, they haven't changed accessibility. They've increased the amount of money that you and I are paying for someone else's kid to go to Harvard private prep.
You know, the same thing's already happening in Idaho, literally like the day after the vote in the Idaho legislature for our school voucher program, Bishop Kelly raised its tuition, the exact amount. So, you know, this is going to give kids on the other side of the tracks the opportunity to go to a good private school. No, it's not. You know, the $5,000 is not going to get you in when now the tuition is $15,000 or $20,000. So the same kids are going to be going that always went. It's not going to, just don't let lawmakers fool you that this is for low-income people to have a chance. No, it's not. No. And exactly that example. You know, it will go up according to whatever you get. Also, there's no cap. So let's say you got 4 kids, then you get $5,000 for each kid. So you get $20,000 in tax credits, but maybe you didn't pay even close to that in taxes. So you're going to get more credit back than you actually paid in. It's a great program. You can see why it passed in Idaho. All right, let's take questions from our audience.
Carol, could I just really quickly add to that? I had a really good example that Senator Kevin Cook sent to me. He's the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee. And he used your example of a household with multiple children. And his example, he says, assume, I'm going to quote Senator Cook, he says, assume an Idaho family of 4 with 2 school-age children earns $96,000 a year. That's 300% of the poverty level and qualifies them to get the $5,000 HB 93 tax credit. After Idaho's standard tax deduction, that family will pay about $3,800 in state income taxes for that year. They will still get refunded their $10,000 credit, which means the state gives them $6,200 more than they paid in. That extra $6,200 comes from the state general fund, which is funded by you, me, and every Idaho taxpayer. It is not just a refund of their taxes. It is not their money. It is our money. It's a check for money they didn't pay. When we use tax credits to take tax dollars from one group and hand them to another, even in education, that is redistribution of wealth. So it's our money. And one of the big arguments we hear is, well, I want my money to take my kid where I went. That's not what we're giving them back. We're giving them back 200% more, right? So a total of 300% of what they paid in.
Thank you. All right, questions from the audience, and I know you had one right off the bat. And microphone there or microphone here. And the reason we want you to use the mics, even if you have a really loud teacher's voice, is we're streaming it. And so that way the mic picks it up for our recording that we will be putting on Facebook for SOS. Okay.
I think I know the answer to this, but a friend of mine threw an interesting twist into what the $5,000 tax credit was all about. And in regards to an example, if somebody has a $10,000 tax bill, does he get $5,000 back, reduced off of that? Or does he just get $5,000 that's tax-free out of his income?
It's my understanding that he gets the 5,000.
Cash.
Right, so no matter-
A reduction of his overall tax bill gets reduced by $5,000.
And we have lawmakers here that are going to join us next. I'm going to take the questions from the audience first, and then our local lawmakers will come up, and that'd be another good question that they might be able to address. Maybe they're serving on JFAC or something like that. Okay, another question from the audience? Thank you.
Yes, I'm Marvin McCall from Pocatello. And I got my teacher education here at Idaho State University. And I remember a quotation, I think it was from John Dewey, that public education is the great equalizer in our democracy. And that stuck in my mind, and I remember it to this day. And it seems like that there are people who seem to be against equal opportunity for all citizens. And also, beyond that, I have a letter here from Dr. Beverly Klug. She was a professor of education here at Idaho State University. And my question is, may I give a copy to each of our panelists? Because it outlines the harms that can be done by the voucher program. And so she wanted me to give you a copy of that.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
You bet, you bet. Another question? Go ahead. I have the same problem, so I know. Thank you.
My name is Steve Niner. I'm here in Pocatello. Good to see a lot of familiar faces. A quick comment before my question, just to speak to the local flair. Hopefully you're all aware who voted in favor and against HB 93 here in our district. Tanya Burgoyne against, Tanya and Dustin in favor of HB 93. Just a friendly reminder. I know there's other elected officials here. I don't know if the two of them are here. I haven't scanned the audience, but they were invited. Coincidence? I don't know.
I told Dave Cannon in Blackfoot, it's not going to be, it won't be a hostile crowd. I won't let them beat up on you. But they are your constituents, so you voted this way. Perhaps you would like the opportunity to explain to these constituents why you did, and he didn't show either. So, yeah.
I'll stop right there.
Thank you.
My question is kind of regarding something Scott said about constitutionality. Is anybody looking more closely at lawsuits based on that question?
So our neighbors in Wyoming have successfully sued the state of Wyoming. That is before a judge right now. The judge has put an injunction on their, what they call ESA program, stating in the judge's opinion that it was most likely unconstitutional because, like the state of Idaho, Wyoming also guarantees a fully funded public education in the state constitution. Our friends to the south of us in Utah have also successfully sued. It's in appeals right now. Interestingly enough, I read yesterday on KSL that the third-party vendor that the state has employed to oversee their voucher program is now putting sideboards on the money, meaning that parents will now have to prove through uploading receipts what they have spent their money on. They will also only be able to use pre-approved vendors that this third-party group has said are okay. So, we have several states around us that are engaging in that legal battle. I think you can confidently say that there are other states that have sued as well. I'm just most familiar with Wyoming and Utah and kind of what's happening in those court cases. The Wyoming one is particularly interesting because the state legislators in that state were told that that bill was going to be unconstitutional while they were arguing it on the state house and senate floor, and they passed it anyway. Keep in mind that they also then got sued because they're not fully funding public education too, and then did something to, I can't remember the loophole they created, but they did something to try to get away from funding public education. So there really is some legal action happening out and around us in other states.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering how the legislature can pass these bills that's against the law. Can't the Supreme Court come and say you can't do that?
So, yeah, just going to the earlier, okay, just going to the earlier question, they can, but somebody needs to bring a suit for it to reach the Supreme Court. And so it does matter. I'm not a huge fan of lawsuits. We deal with way too many of them as a school district. But I do think there's a time and place where it is a civic responsibility to challenge the legislation that gets put forward that we believe is unconstitutional. So as was shared earlier, there are other states, there have been lawsuits. It really is a state issue. I don't think this is necessarily a U.S. Supreme Court issue. There are some interesting things happening at the U.S. Supreme Court around religious freedom and sending public money to religious schools. But I really believe in Idaho, the key that it centers on is both, number one, the Blaine Amendment, but two, is the Article 9 that I quoted about the legislator's duty to establish uniform and thorough system of free public common schools. So I do hope at some point our Supreme Court does get the opportunity, but somebody's going to need to bring a suit forward to challenge the law first.
We are looking for volunteers tonight. Anybody? No? All right, go ahead.
Victor Gunner, I'm a current educator in Bannock County. Twofold question. So my father was on a school board in Pennsylvania, and one of the issues that they had in their school board was through their homeschool situation, they were spending millions of dollars out of their district that was going to out-of-state companies. So first of all, did the legislature, do you know how much is going to be kept in Idaho versus going out of Idaho? And the second question, and I know James and Nate are here, and I don't know who else are public officials, so James, this might be one for you, or Doug, another one that would be good. We look at what's happening today, but a really good teacher or a really good educator says, what am I doing to set the student up for a lifelong learning experience as they move forward into taking care of all of our future expenses as a contributing citizen in our community? So my question then would be, without accountability of having to have any of the testing or proving or anything that says we're actually providing a high quality, exemplary educational system, how are we really setting students up? And what do we do when we get to that point that the kids that are going skiing now want to go on and gain higher degrees or certifications and they don't have the skills? I'm a huge proponent of homeschool and charter schools and all those kind of things. I think it's great, but there's nothing that will take the place of a one-on-one or face-to-face educational opportunity.
You know, one of the things we learned last night is Idaho pays less per pupil than anywhere in the United States. Okay, so we're 50th in how much we spend on our kids. But our fourth grade math and reading scores come in fourth. So it isn't, you know, that you throw money at things and you make it work. It is our teachers. It is their dedication, you know, that make this work.
I just wanted to give couple of short answers. The millions going out of state, I have a copy of the legislation here if anyone wants to gander through it later. There is no restriction whatsoever written into the legislation about that money being spent out of state, which is where a lot of the homeschooling curriculum comes from. It's where a lot of the online money is going to. There is absolutely nothing capping or restricting money from leaving the state. As far as has it gone out of state, I guess we'll find out next year maybe, except that it's not transparent, so we don't know where it's going. And as far as looking down the road, so far the few studies that we do have on those opportunities in those states that have shifted have proven that the more kids we take out of our public education system, the more detrimental it is to the fabric of society. Think of our individuals as threads in a tapestry, and the more of them that we pull out, the more that tapestry starts to fall apart. The ADD Resource Center said that public schools currently serve over 90% of American children and play a role in promoting equality, civic responsibility, and social mobility. When we restrict those opportunities, we don't just shift opportunity, we shift accountability and the foundation of public education. So the short answer, in my opinion, is no, they don't. There is no accountability, and those opportunities will be limited for those students moving forward.
Two questions. It's been explained pretty well, the unconstitutional nature of what they've done. But don't you think we need to address the elephant in the room in terms of the political process, that constitutional checks and balances don't work without a two-party system, and we need to resurrect the two-party system in the state of Idaho. With all due respects to the educator over there in government, I understand the reality, and I'm a realist, that the primary election in many cases is the general election in Idaho. I personally find there's something wrong with that. At some point, don't we have to come out and say, look, we need more legislators and we need to get rid of our supermajority party, because in my humble opinion, we have a minority masquerading as a majority in the legislature. And as much as I appreciate legislators that are part of the supermajority for voting against this, with all due respects, I think they're enabling the same thing to continue to happen because they're part of that supermajority that can't put a check on this. So my question is, on that one is, do we need to resurrect the two-party system? The second thing has to do with students with IEP, special needs students. Is there not a vehicle legally? Because there still are federal laws in place, and a lot of these IEP kids, despite the $7,500 credit that's being given, the harsh reality is special needs kids are already very much underfunded. So is there a vehicle through ADA or other types of law currently existing that this violates those laws, as well as being, of course, unconstitutional? Thank you.
So I'll start with that second question. The other one's that's a really good issue to untangle. But as far as discrimination against students with disabilities, I would hope that families with students with high needs that want to access private institutions are turned away. I do hope that they'll challenge that, because I do believe that that's discrimination. I think the challenge is going to be what other reasons can that private institution come up with on why they won't educate that child. Because the reality is, it doesn't cost the same to educate every child in the state. Even in my own family, I have 5 children that went through our public education system. I have some kids that were pretty inexpensive for our schools to educate. I have other kids that needed speech therapy, and so there was additional cost that it took to educate those students. We have some students in our district that have extremely high medical needs that are literally sitting on not life support systems, but they're on ventilators and those types of things in our classrooms that take a full-time certified nursing assistant or sometimes even an RN to be there with them, and those are extremely expensive. You're not going to educate that student for $7,500. They're cost us upwards of $80,000 to $100,000 per kid. No private school is going to take that student on, right, for that tuition. And so I absolutely believe that, yeah, we are going to see those students will not have the same opportunity to access this funding as other kids that are going to be much easier to educate. And that really does create that inequality that we've been talking about. So, and yeah, I'll just say personally, I believe that when Idaho closed its primaries, we took a step that set us on the path that we're currently at with a really interesting dynamics in our legislature. I'm a fourth generation, probably actually fifth generation Idahoan. I grew up with Dirk Kempthorne as our governor.
I want you to know I did my part. I carried that primary petition around for a year. We had plenty of signatures, all right? And it was painful. It was painful, the level of, this is a bad word, I'm going to use it, bad word, the level of stupidity of people in Idaho about their own rights. And I would explain to them, when you go in and you get a ballot and you have to say which one you want, which party, you want a Republican ballot or you want a blank Democrat ballot, that's what we get in Bingham County. And they said, I've never been asked that. Yeah. No, I haven't. Yeah, you have. Yeah. No, I've always voted for both. Not in the primary, you haven't. You know, and these are adults that look relatively educated, and somehow they missed government class their senior year. So again, education, and know who you're voting for. And for Pete's sake, get out there and vote in the primary. You've got to get in the May, because it's all over at the end of May. All right, any more questions? You got one?
As a retired public school educator who spent an average, I spent an average of at least $1,000 a year on supplies for my classroom and things I thought the students needed. I want to know, when did Idaho fully fund education?
Did you have a question? No? Yes? No? Whoever? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were responding. Hi, my name is Amy. I'll say in my 30s. And something that I'm noticing when I attend different events in Pocatello like this is I see the same faces over and over again at many events, which I appreciate the participation of the people who are participating. But what I do notice is a lack of different faces, or different generations of faces, I should say. And so my question is, how do you see it that we're going to educate people and get this information to parents who are busy with their daily lives and whose kids are probably taking up their time so that they can't come to a meeting? Like, how are we going to connect to the people who are most impacted and who need to have a voice?
Well, you're buying coffee tomorrow for your best friends, and you're going to tell them. Okay. No, I think that's a lot of it, is you, at church, at the swimming pool, at the YMCA, at Apple. You know now what you need to say. You have to get out there and say it.
I want to add that I was thinking while I was sitting here, perhaps there needs to be events with people like you who have more expertise in places like our parks, maybe like while we're having our lunch in the park kind of things, to be able to talk to parents. And I know that's hard because people also are not interested necessarily in listening to strangers, but there has to be a way to have more educated people telling us in accessible places for parents, as an idea.
Excellent point. I'm going to... The parks? Get it. No, there's nothing to apologize for there. I'm going to take this last question just so nobody gets in line and just has to stand there, and then we're going to listen to our lawmakers, okay? Okay, you, and then you, yes.
My name is Kay Flowers. I'm the daughter of a government and economics teacher, and we were discussing vouchers 40 years ago because they were still an issue back then when they were first coming up. During that time, I heard arguments that I have not heard here, and I was wondering if they're relevant. One is that the quality of your schools affects the value of your home. If you live in a good neighborhood with a good school, the price of your home tends to stay up. And secondly, and this is something I learned when I came to Idaho, Idaho would like to attract some more businesses, some more world, headquarters, some more companies that are looking for a good workforce. And a good workforce is dependent on the quality of the schools. Have we been using those arguments? Because I love all the arguments I've heard, but that one hasn't come up yet.
I
I think you make an excellent point. Also, I'm so excited that your parent was a government teacher. I would say that that's what's most baffling to me with the governor signing HB 93, besides the fact that 37,000 of us asked him not to, is that he has actually said to educators that he needs us to have a highly educated workforce in order to attract those high-end companies coming into Idaho. So then why does he pass a bill that is going to detrimentally keep us from recruiting those high-end employers because we won't have the money necessary to fund a public education? And I don't have the answer to why he did that, but it does baffle me because I've been in the room with the governor when he has said that directly to a room full of educators.
If I could just add, I think you touched on, I think, two really important things that I think are helpful to think about. So one is, interesting that you talked about vouchers 40 years ago. This whole idea about moving away from a public education system really stemmed from the civil rights movements of the 1960s. So when schools started to desegregate, then there were candidly white people that didn't want their kids going to school with children of color, and that's where this whole movement started. And it has been a persistent, under the radar movement ever since then. And now we're just seeing it coming to a head all across the country, and especially in conservative states like Idaho. So I think it's important to recognize the history and the motives behind this, because the whole idea is we don't want our kids going to school with kids like those. And that is really the push for a lot of people that believe in vouchers.
Thank you for saying that out loud.
You're welcome. So usually my wife wishes I wouldn't say things loud that I say, but in this case I'm going to. I think the second thing is, it's just so interesting that there's this I believe completely false narrative that Idaho schools are failing and that American schools are failing. And that narrative really fuels this whole idea that we have to get kids out of public schools. But there is almost no evidence at all. If you ever push back on that and say, show me where they're failing, there's no evidence to support that. You might get one-off stories. And I think the very best example is if you go back to 1983, where this was really the first time that this whole idea that American schools are failing became like this huge national headline, and it came from A Nation at Risk. And when they published that report, they said, we have a failing system, and if a foreign government would have done this, it would have been considered an act of war. Well, if you look at what our economy has done since 1983, our GDP has absolutely grown exponentially. That doesn't happen if you have a failing education system. It goes right to the workforce issue, right? If we were truly failing to prepare an adequate workforce, we would truly have a failing economy. That's not what has happened over the last 40 to 50 years. And so what we have are these false narratives that continue to get pushed that fuel this idea that we have to have a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And I think we're naive if we don't recognize that and address those fundamental misconceptions and lies that really fuel this argument.
I just want to add a little clarification, because you are going to run into those people who bring those things forward and they're like, we're failing and compared to the world. Over the 30 years I've been involved in speech and debate, education in the United States has been a topic 6 times. So I have spent 6 years of my life researching and finding out things that nobody should know. So when I give you random facts, I'm sorry, it's been part of my career for the last 30 years. However, when those studies came out in the 80s saying that American schools were failing, it was in relation to other countries and things that were happening in other countries. And one of the things and the contexts that we fail to take into account any time that we compare ourselves to other countries is that those countries are not testing all of their students. Those countries are not advancing all of their students. We are comparing our entire average as American educators to the top 5 to 10% of another country. And you cannot take the top 5% who made it through to 12th grade in Japan or in China and then compare that to every single student, whether they are on an IEP, whether they are without a residence, whether they are sleeping in a truck, whether they have food to eat. We take all of those students and we bring them through our school systems, and our average of those amazing kids is what we are comparing to the top 5% somewhere else. We absolutely are not failing these kids.
I'm Elizabeth Dyer. I live in Chubbuck, and I volunteer at Chubbuck Elementary School. I'm a retired teacher. My question is, with all the things that the legislature and the school districts have to worry about with the results of HB 93, what's going to happen if the Department of Education is dismantled at the federal level?
Right.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. My guess is we're going to get stuck with all the same regulations with absolutely even less support to meet those regulations. So the reality is what happens at the federal level, right? So there's nothing in our U.S. Constitution about education. So it falls under the idea that any powers that are not delegated to the federal government come back to the states. And so really education should primarily be the state's responsibility. Going back to the 1960s, though, the federal government really started to step in because states weren't all doing the right things when it came to education. And so that's where they said we need to do a better job of helping every child have access to education. And so they put in rules and regulations, but they also did put in federal support to help that. Some of that federal support works great. It helps support our students that are coming from our poor circumstances with our Title I schools. In other cases, it just simply hasn't kept pace. So we have a radically different approach to educating students with disabilities now than we had when I was in school, which doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but 30 years ago, it was a very different approach with students with severe disabilities. Now we truly believe we've got to educate all students to the very best ability we can. We see a lot of kids in our general education classrooms that we would have never seen 30 years ago, which is fantastic. And that came because of those federal laws. What would be really damn helpful would be to have the support, the financial support to also do that. So that's what I'm really afraid of, is we're going to be left with a lot of the same responsibilities and regulations without even the meager funding we currently get from the federal government to meet those obligations.
If we could have our lawmakers that are here tonight, Rick and Jim Guthrie, anybody I'm missing, come on up here. Where are we? Got him. Got Ruckty, got Cheatham. Because I'll be real honest with you. Actually, I know these two yahoos, and I know Jim really well. Jim, come on up here, and I want you to use this mic so everybody can see you. And am I missing anybody? I don't want to, even if you're a lawmaker that voted yes for this, it's okay. I will protect you. That is my job. My job. I will protect you. So if you guys would just tell us why you voted no.
When you read the bill, if you read House Bill 93, you quickly realize this isn't an education bill. This is a tax bill. And that's why it started in the House Revenue and Taxation Committee and not in education. And what this does is change the way we're assessing taxes and passing out the money through vouchers. I was very concerned, and I've talked to, I think I've got 7 school districts within my district, which is District 28. Mr. Guthrie and I, Senator Guthrie and I, served in 28, which is all of Power County, all of Franklin County, and parts of Bannock County. Not a lot, but parts of Bannock County, but it does include the Marsh Valley School District. I talked to the superintendents when this was all going on. It seemed like almost every week I was on the phone with every one of them trying to see how this thing was going to affect things. And one of my great concerns is how it affects rural Idaho. Because as we've heard tonight, we don't have options in rural Idaho. We have public schools. We don't have charter schools. We don't have private schools. Can we get it down? We have homeschooling. And the homeschoolers fought hard against this bill. They didn't want it. They liked the way things were and have been. You know, we're talking a lot about what's going to happen. We don't know. The State Tax Commission right now is frantically trying to develop the forms and the processes that'll be used when these applications start coming in during the tax season next year. Because this affects the 2025 tax year, which we'll start getting filing on in February. And that's when this will all go into effect. You know, it's rural schools are a big concern of mine. I came to Idaho the same year Carol did, 1977. Yeah, that's been a long, I won't mention how many years ago that's been, Carol, but I grew up in a little town in western Kansas, a county of 3,000 people, a school that had 400 kids, K through 12, and I got a hell of an education. I think they did a fantastic job in the 1950s and 1960s. The school district has changed a lot back there. They've had to consolidate districts. Now there's one school for the entire county. When I was growing up, there were 3. But we've got a lot of things to figure out. This $50 million is a cooked deal. It was cooked when it started. When it came to the House Revenue and Taxation Committee, which is one of the committees I serve on, I debated against it. I voted against it both times, and then it went to the House floor because they had a majority in the committee. If I remember right, the vote was 7-4 on the committee. And then it went to the House floor, and it was held a while, talked about what could be done to give it more impetus because they were concerned about its passage. It passed, it went over the Senate, it sat around a while, and finally was passed there and went through committee and went to the floor over there. But it was a highly discussed bill, and the buzzwords that were used were school choice. Like we're going to get something new, a new way to educate our kids. Well, we're not. We have every one of the choices that are possible right now already in the state of Idaho. And that, we're there. But it was, I'm a little more pessimistic than Scott is about what's going to happen in the future. I think we're going to continue to have public schools, but they're not going to be what you and I think of as public schools, and they're not going to be teaching what you and I think they ought to be teaching. And I'm very concerned about the future of the state if this bill and those who are pushing it legislatively and politically continue to dominate in our state. Do we have a two-party system? I don't think we do. I think we have a 3-party system right now. There's just 2 parties using the same logo. But I'll shut up and sit down.
One other person that's not here from District 28 is Dan Gardner, and he voted against House Bill 93 as well, and so I want to make sure we mention that. If you're not pissed off about this, you're not really paying attention to what's going on. And I want to take a little different tact here because we're about to have a perfect storm here in the next couple of years, fiscally for this state. You may have noticed that the governor, I think it was mentioned up here, the governor has asked state agencies to take a look at their budgets and to prepare for 3 different plans for budget holdbacks, 2%, 4%, 6%. And when the public outcry, when people pointed out, how are we going to do holdbacks when we just sent $50 million to private schools and religious schools unaccounted for, no oversight over how it's going to be spent, how in the world do we not have enough money to pay our bills? And he came out and he said, oh, no, we have a $345 million surplus. By the way, 87 million of that comes from cuts that we made this legislative session to the K through 12 system in higher ed. 87 million. At a time when we had the money to pay that, to fund those budgets, we didn't do. We didn't do it. So 2%, 4%, 6% holdbacks, how did we get here? Well, and this is serious. These holdbacks are something we rarely do. We did it when COVID was here. I remember doing holdbacks then to the state budgets. We did it during the Great Recession. I was in the legislature then, and we cut deep. We cut to the bone. We cut K through 12 to the bone. We cut higher ed and transportation. Everybody took a hit. Every agency took a hit, and it took us a decade to get back to our public school spending after we cut like we did. 9/11, we did budget holdbacks after 9/11. Each of those examples are times when outside forces did something to the state. But this time, it's because we've done it to ourselves. Since Governor Little took office, and he has a press release out there, he's bragging about it, $6 billion we've cut in revenue from the state of Idaho since 2019. Since 2022, in state income tax alone, we have cut $3 billion. Income tax alone, and guess where that money came from? It was the rich having to pay less so that we could do tax cuts for them. That's 2022, and we have a $945 million ongoing revenue loss in income tax alone. Every year, we have $945 million less in dollars for our budgets because of those income tax cuts. This year, in the legislative session, we did a $453 million tax cut. $453 million. That includes the voucher bill. And, by the way, Governor Little, during the State of the State at the beginning of the session, he said we could only afford $100 million in tax cuts. And yet, by the end of the session, suddenly he was okay with $453 million. We're doing it to ourselves. We're doing it to ourselves. If you're not pissed about what we're doing to the state, what we're doing to our public education system, you're not paying attention. And I get it, it's hard to get people to get engaged, but if a group this size went out into our community and talked to neighbors and funded good candidates and supported good candidates and made sure we got them over the finish line, we could make some changes. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm just impressed with the size of the crowd here. And I can't help but tag on to Senator Ruckley's passion. And remember a few years ago, I think there was a movie called The Network, and the tagline was, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." I don't know if you remember that. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take people to get involved and get involved in the election process and the primaries. And this is a situation where you notice the lines between Democrat and Republican have been blurred a little bit. And I think that's appropriate at times, especially on something this important. But it's also important to know, how did we get here? If you look at the out-of-state money that came in the last election cycle, it completely turned over the legislators in particularly the Magic Valley. It turned them over. And that out-of-state money was based on the premise that they were going to vote for the voucher bill. That was the whole deal. And so that was a big part of the problem. The other part of the situation is redundancy. You ever had your kids come to you and say, "Can I stay at Timmy's house tonight?" No. "Can I stay at Timmy's house tonight?" No. And finally you wear down and you let him stay at Timmy's house. Well, that's what happened. For 3 or 4 years in a row, we've had a voucher bill. And every year they wear you down a little bit. And finally it gets the governor to where he put any state of the state, $50 million for private schools and for vouchers, and it passed. Carol brought up Bishop Kelly raising their tuition, and I don't know to the extent they've done that, but when I did the research, they were around $14,000 a year, and so the state pays $9,600 a year on average. So if you're going to give somebody $5,000 and think that the less affluent are going to take advantage of that, it's not going to happen. That's going to go to the affluent population that can afford it, and particularly with special ed at $7,500, they're not going to take $7,500 when it costs. You heard some of the numbers that are outrageous. They're just not going to do that. So by virtue of that, they've screened out that demographic. The taxes were talked about. You got 4 kids, you get $5,000 each, $20,000. Your tax bill's $5,000. The state is going to write you a check for $15,000 for the balance. That's absurd to me. No accountability, we talked about that. All you have to be is an accredited school or have a survey from a parent. That's pretty benign. Also, one of the big concerns we've got to watch, in my opinion, Launch has been a very popular program. That money is being targeted for use in the voucher and the tax credit program. So we've got to really watch that if you believe that Launch is a good thing. You talk about it going to religious and private schools and those kind of things. One of the things the legislature is always worried about, are they teaching CRT? Are they teaching diversity, equity, inclusion? Are they teaching those kind of things in our colleges and our high schools? And they worry about that every year. Well, this allows a school to teach those very things, and your tax dollars is going to pay for that. There's no limits on what they can teach. They can teach that. Once your kid is vested in the program, your student is in the program, they are grandfathered in. And so they are first in line. And so any new blood can't come into the program as long as these kids, because they don't have to compete for that spot again. It's mentioned the veto numbers and the ones that wanted him to veto it and whatever. I went in and talked to the governor a couple days before he signed it, and I will tell you that in the 15 years I've been in the legislature, House Bill 93 makes the short list for me on one of the most irresponsible pieces of legislation that we've passed. Last thing I'll mention is the Tax Commission is monitoring this. They're the ones that are going to administer this program. It started out that they would need $130,000 in their fiscal note to do this. Before the session was over, that ballooned to several $100,000 with the addition of, it was either 7 or 9 more employees before the program even got off the ground. So that's problematic in its own right. Again, glad to see the interest and the turnout. That's what it's going to take, and it's going to take word of mouth and to try to get, the faucet shut off on what's being spent, and maybe some kind of migration back to a more sensible education policy.
Thank you so much. And one of the things that we want to make sure that our lawmakers know is, if you get threatened to be primaried, you need to know that you have people that will have your backs. So when you get those lovely little gorgeous postcards, shiny and sparkly, and they are putting down one of our lawmakers on a topic that has nothing to do with school, they'll come up with something else altogether, so you'll vote no. You have to have the courage to know, and we have the responsibility to let them know we got their backs, they still have our vote, you can come home, don't worry about being primaried. But that takes funds. We need to make contributions. We've got to write checks, okay? We got to help these guys and gals so we get the kind of lawmakers in that we want. All right, you guys, I really appreciate you showing up. What is our motto? What is the motto? That's pretty good. I want to hear it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Not $1 more. Drive home safely, and thank you for coming tonight.
That chair is not nice.